Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Roundup. I am your usual host, David Fox. With me, as usual, as well, is my wonderful and lovely, fantastic co-host, UberHansen. We are here live to discuss the NFL Combine, which is wrapping up, and of all the wonderful players that participated and all the great stuff that's going to come out of that. But we're also really here to talk about the Bills' offense, how it stands right now, what they can do to add to it, to improve it through free agency and the draft. Tons of stuff that we're gonna go through. It's gonna be a good time. But before we get into any of that, Uber, how are you?
Yeah, I'm good. I'm good. And you just called me lovely, which makes my day so much better. So thank you for
Well,
that.
good. I'm glad. Yeah, it's gonna be a very good. We did this last week with the defense. We're gonna do it this week with the offense. I think that we'll discuss a lot of different things. It's spoiler alert, it's largely going to be about running backs and wide receivers. Probably a lot of wide receivers. We'll do a little bit. We'll go through the whole roster like we did last week on the offensive side. We'll talk about things. But yeah, that's going to be the basic breakdown of the show. If you are coming into the show right now, leave a like, hit that like button right now, throw your comment into the chat. Share it with your friends, enemies, lovers, and neighbors. And here's a comment right now. Mark Krzyzewski, whose name I'm pretty sure I mispronounced last week, and I'm probably mispronouncing now. Good evening, gentlemen. Good evening to you, Mark. Yeah, so before we get too deep into this, we, of course, have to thank our wonderful and fantastic sponsors. And for the first of that, that's actually a lot of you guys. And to talk more about that, we go to Greg and Aaron from the Cover One flagship show.
Many people ask us the best way to support us here at Cover One, and that is to sign up to become a Cover One Pass member. That contribution helps give us the access to all the data and information we use to create the content that you love.
And I think most importantly, brings you into our community of insiders. It's a great community based on Slack. I know a lot of people don't want to be on social media anymore or be in on those conversations. We bring all of it to you right in our great community of educated fans. And most importantly, you get access to our content creators.
Even better than that, everybody loves merch. You get awesome t-shirts, a cool decal, and a letter from the Cover One team signed directly to you.
All for $60. That gets you the entire season, next year's free agency and draft. $60. Click the link in the description. Cover One Insider. Become one today.
Thank you to Greg and Aaron. And actually, something that's important when talking about One Pass right now, we are currently running a little giveaway. It's actually not a little giveaway. It's a very big giveaway. If you sign up for One Pass between now and the NFL draft, you will be entered to win some things, not including but not limited to a Bills neon sign, pretty cool. Josh Allen jersey, I got one right there, pretty cool. Let me tell you something, it's pretty cool having both an Allen and a Diggs jersey. Having Allen though, I mean, come on, that's great. And if that's not enough, a PlayStation 5. I don't know if you guys know this, but getting a PlayStation 5 is not cheap. Like, those things cost a lot of money, way more than $60 a year, which is what you're spending for One Pass. I mean, that jersey is also expensive. The neon sign is probably a pretty penny. You would be entered to win all of that and more. So go sign up for One Pass. You'll get all of the best content in the world when it comes to the Buffalo Bills. It'll be great. It's totally worth it. Promise you. It's something you will not regret. So sign up for One Pass. In addition to that, we also thank our wonderful sponsors over at Underdog Fantasy. Folks, we know the season is over. We know you're looking forward to next season. We get that. It's going to be great. I promise you. If you want to make it better, though, go to Underdog Fantasy. You can use the promo code COVER1 when signing up to make your first deposit, and they will match that deposit up to $100. That is a free $100 when you use the promo code COVER1. Sign up today and start winning today. I totally forgot to bring up that actual script for that. That was totally off the cuff. I feel amazing right now. That's what happens when you do it every week for like a year and a half. At a certain point, you know what you need to say and you do it. Let's get into some of these comments. My real life 716, thank you for joining us. How do you feel if the Bills trade out of the first to the top of the second? Great question. Actually did a couple of mock drafts last night. May have been last night. Who knows anymore? My perception of time is such a blur these days. But trading out of the first and picking up the offer I got was like an extra second this year and another second next year. I was like, heck yeah, I'll take that. To go from like 28 to 46, I'll take that. I forget exactly who I ended up with, but it was pretty good draft. And knowing that I had another second next year felt like, yeah, that was totally worth it. I remember I got a wide receiver, and I know I got a defensive lineman. Actually, the defensive lineman that I got was Byron Murphy. So, like, I'm good with that. I don't think that'll actually happen. I don't think Byron Murphy's falling in this middle of the second round, but there's plenty of depth and options at wide receiver, at defensive line, and even at running back. So I think trading out of that 28th overall pick could be an option for the Bills. I think it's definitely an option. All right, Michael Barber, can Lad McConkey be a good X receiver? We will talk about Lad McConkey. I promise you that. Stay tuned to that. We were going to talk a lot about Lad McConkey if I have anything to say about it. Our wonderful friend Joe DeRosa at Under Review Tuesday nights, 7 p.m. Check it out. Good evening, One Pass Hansen and One Pass Fox. It's a beautiful day to purchase the One Pass. He is, of course, right, as Joe often is. Mark says, did a mock draft a few minutes ago, traded down to pick 41 and 57 for pick 28, got Worthy at 41, Legette at 57, Chris Jenkins at 60, Fisk at 100. I don't think that's happening. And running back right at 129. What are your thoughts? Not bad, but like a lot of mock drafts that happen right now, right, where we're all in our minds ahead of where people have updated their rankings and how they have their mock draft machines working right now. So somebody like Braden Fiske at 100 is probably not going to happen because I feel like Braden Fiske through the last like month has skyrocketed his draft stock to potentially being like a first round pick. So that would surprise me if he was available there. But Legette at 57, we'll talk about Legette as well. Worthy at 41. I don't think that's happening anymore. But we'll see what happens. You never know what happens in that draft. That's why we're here. Let's see. Roy Collins says, why would anyone want a Josh Allen jersey if he's being traded to Chicago? If you don't know what this is referring to, good. Don't give it any more thought or attention. Just leave it alone. Duncan, Idaho. For those who are unaware, Duncan, Idaho is a character from Dune. So this is right in line with this podcast. Even if you are a Chiefs fan, it looks like Hi Bills Nation. Yeah, who'd have thought having a Chiefs fan here? Maybe they're also maybe some Chiefs fans are just celebrating the fact that Russell Wilson got cut today for an $85 million package, and they just want to interact with people. That's how I'm going to pretend that this is happening. All right. Before we get too deep into this, I've already talked a lot. Uber, do you have any initial thoughts before we jump into what we're going to do?
So two things. So you introduced me to Braden Fiske last week. So I did a little bit of watching on him, and I forgot who it was. Somebody in the comments said Kyle Williams.
Yeah.
My God, man. Yeah. I like, and the number 55 at times when you're running, it kind of looks like a 95, and the way he's moving, the motor. Now I'm all in on Braden Fiske. And to your point, like, he's not going to be, he might not even be there at 28 for the Bills, like, for all I know. So there's a chance that there's a pretty good chance he's not going to be on the Buffalo Bills roster, which is upsetting for me. So I'm already upset with you for kind of pushing that on me a little bit. And then the other part is the Russell Wilson thing. I mean, my good, $85 million dead cap. I love it. It makes me happy. It also makes me happy because the cap isn't real, people are going to have a really hard time dealing with what's going to happen to the Broncos over the next couple weeks here. And those things that happen to the Broncos could be good for a team like the Bills that's trying to trade for something, maybe get something cheap from that team.
Yeah, I mean, I said this in the Cover One group chat earlier. If I was in a position where I managed a professional football team and I felt like my best decision was to release a player and have him incur $85 million in dead cap money just so he doesn't play for my team, I'm pretty sure I would just stroke out having to make that decision. I would lose my mind knowing that I would have to pay someone that much money in order to not have him play on my team. I don't know how, like, I know how the Broncos arrived here. Like, I understand how they got here, but it's bizarre how badly this trade has gone for them. I mean, it's actually insane. It goes beyond comprehension at times, just thinking about this, because at the time we all thought, oh, wow, Russell Wilson gets out of Seattle. He's going to go to an offense that's going to really work with him. He's going to be great. Let Russ cook, all that stuff. And they were so bad that first year with Nate Hackett. But we also kind of saw that Nate Hackett was really bad as a head coach. And it was kind of like, okay, maybe there's still something here with Russell Wilson, right? There has to be. Like, there's no way he just fell off a cliff that hard just because he left Seattle. It doesn't make any sense. So you bring in Sean Payton, who wanted to work with Russell Wilson. They actually traded to get Sean Payton because the Saints still retained his rights as a coach. And Sean Payton, to his credit, got the Broncos going, right? Like, they were an okay team by the end of the season. They weren't a good team, but they were an okay team. They were a competitive team. But it was also clear whenever you watched any Broncos game how much he was hiding Russell Wilson. It was like, here's a couple of go balls, here's some screens, and we're going to run the ball 30 times a game. It was ridiculous. It got to a point where once he had benched Russell Wilson by the end of the season, it was like, this is over. This is done with. You can't come back and have him start again in 2024. You just can't have this happen. The writing was on the wall pretty much the entire time. It just has become one of the most lopsided trades in NFL history. It's going to be up there with, like, the Herschel Walker trade. And honestly, we could sit here and say this is one of the worst trades in NFL history, but the reality is it might not end up being as bad as the Deshaun Watson trade that Cleveland had.
Yep.
Because Cleveland gave Deshaun Watson a fully guaranteed contract for $250 million. $250 million fully guaranteed. And gave up a number of draft picks in order to do it. And yes, Cleveland made the playoffs, but where are they going to be without where are they going to be out without Joe Flacco, man? Like, you can't sit here and tell me Deshaun Watson's really your future and then he's going to win you games.
Do you know Deshaun Watson's dead cap right now?
So if they cut him, it's got to be over 100 million, right?
Oh, yeah, it's over 100. That's for sure. $201 million. God. He's almost the cap limit himself in dead cap. He's pretty close to it. So the idea that the Broncos cut Russell for 85, yeah, I mean, Deshaun Watson's not going anywhere because they literally they can't field a team if they cut him. But this is still stunning. The one thing I'll say is at the time of the trade, it for the most part made sense. Like, let's go get an established quarterback. They gave up a lot, probably a little bit too much for an established quarterback. But he was a first ballot Hall of Famer, or going to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I don't think he's going to be a Hall of Famer.
He was in the conversation, right?
Yes.
I don't know how strong that case would have been. I think eventually he probably would have gotten in. But, like, he was clearly one of the best quarterbacks of the 2010s. easily.
Yes.
And then to go to the Broncos felt like this is going to be the part of his career where he takes off when he's older, and that will cement his Hall of Fame status. That's sort of what that felt like. It's just like falling off a cliff. I mean, there's no other way to describe it. It is almost unfathomable how bad Russell Wilson has been since he got traded.
And to a point where, like, I don't think he's in the conversation for Hall of Fame. Like, I don't think he will get into the Hall of Fame now.
No,
I just don't know, because he has to string together probably 3 more good years of football. And I went through I don't know if he starts in 2024, which is kind of wild to think about. There has to be a team
some team will go get him. Like there's always a team that wants a quarterback. Patriots, Atlanta, Tampa, if they don't bring Baker back. I mean, there's always somebody that wants a quarterback.
Yeah.
But man, it is just rough out there for if you're Russell Wilson. I don't know what you're supposed to do at this point. If you even bring in Russell Wilson, because I imagine he would be cheap, right? But
I hope so.
You would hope so, but oh my gosh, I don't get it, man. This is one of the most insane developments that I can remember happening in the NFL in a long, long time. Just crazy how this is all unfolded. We've talked enough about this. We're gonna dive into the Bills' offense right now. So, first things first, a little bit of news that will affect things. Running back Nyheim Hines has been officially cut or is expected to be cut. He will save, what is it, $4 or $5 million, something like that.
I think it's like 4.5, 4.3, something.
Yeah, let me check with my producer real quick. But in terms of this is not surprising, right? This was to me a very expected move. He obviously tore his ACL last year. It's $4.6 million that they'll save. So he tore his ACL in a very unfortunate and strange boating accident. We should have known that the Bill season was going to be nuts.
Yeah. When
that's how it started. Nyheim Hines tears his ACL in a boating accident. But obviously couldn't contribute in 2023, so he ended up just not being able to do anything. It's not surprising that they're going to offload him, saving the money that they're going to do when you're kind of pressed against the wall for cap space, even with the increase that was unexpected. I do think that this was a good move, a right move. Like this is what they needed to do.
Yeah, I just think like the one weird thing to me was Brandon Beane explicitly bringing Nyheim Hines up and saying he's in the plans for us in 2024. He said that back, I think, February at some point. And now, before we even get to kind of the required cut down moment, we're already kind of releasing him. But you're right. It does make sense. Let's save the money. The Bills need the money. And in all reality, they could still bring him back if he can get healthy at a lower cap hit. Would you say it said 4.5, 4.6?
4.6.
Yeah. So in theory, if he, can't find a landing spot elsewhere and the Bills do want to bring him back, you offer him $2 million, let's say, and then you save 2.6 just by cutting him. So I still think that's on the table, though it sounds like, at least the way like Sal Capaccio was kind of wording it in his a tweet, that it was a failed physical or possibly a failed physical. And if that's the case, then there's some more concern for Nyheim Hines, just his football future in general, not just with the Bills. Yeah,
it's unfortunate. I liked Nyheim Hines when he was with the Colts. Very fun, dynamic player. But, if you're not able to be 100%, that's a tough sell for any running back or any player, really. So it's unfortunate, but it is the right decision, I think. That, I believe, is the only real bit of news.
Yep.
So let's just go into this. Let's go position by position. Some of this will go easier and quicker than others. Let's start with quarterback. So once the Bills trade Josh Allen to the Bears and get like 3 first-round picks, Josh Allen's not going anywhere. We all know that. He's one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. I think maybe, I guess you could upgrade Kyle Allen. I also don't care enough about backup quarterback to spend more than a couple minutes, if that, on it. So, you could do better than Kyle Allen. They have Shane Buechele on the roster. Like, okay, whatever. I don't. It is what it is. The reality is that if Josh Allen is not playing, then it doesn't really matter who the backup is, because they're not going to be as good as Josh Allen, and they probably won't win any games without Josh Allen. It's just unfortunate, sort of, but that it's the truth. Like, it just is what it is.
Yeah, I'm with you. Like, I'm adamant about backup quarterback, like spend as little as possible, because there's no backup quarterback that I remotely feel comfortable with the Bills roster and the way that this Bills offense works, trusting any quarterback not named Josh Allen to be able to kind of succeed here. And I know people will bring up, Jake Browning with the Bengals, which I think is a bit of a flash in the pan. And also he had so much talent at wide receiver around him that it does make his job easier. Josh is just asked to do more in this offense than most quarterbacks. Like, no, Joe Burrow's not running like Josh is. He's not producing those yards, those touchdowns. So if you bring in the backup quarterback for whatever reason, you're just not going to get production. So spend as little as possible, to a point where if the Bills drafted a quarterback in, say, the 4th or 5th round, I'd be pissed. The earliest I'd spend a pick on a backup quarterback is the 6th round, hopefully the 7th round. In all reality, if they want to bring Mitch Trubisky back at a vet min deal, because I don't know what else he's going to get from anyone else, I don't care, because I really don't care about the backup quarterback position.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Roy Collins says draft a quarterback around 6 or so, develop him so we don't have the QB carousel every year. Mark Krzyzewski, guys, what do you think about offering a contract for Drew Lock? Depends on how much. But Drew Lock is, as far as backups go, I'd take Drew Lock. I'd be okay with that. If nothing else, he's a confident person, and so that's part of the game. That is just part of it. When you're put into a position, you have to be confident that you can go out there and win a game. And I think that Drew Lock, if nothing else, has that confidence in himself. Mark also says, I would love Joe Milton in the 6th round. I will not tolerate Mickey Mouse offense quarterbacks. Not happening. I didn't do it with Hendon Hooker last year. I'm not doing it with Joe Milton this year. Not happening. The University of Tennessee offense is an absurd. It's an affront to football.
Give me a late round quarterback that you would consider, like, a late day 3 guy that you think would be there, that you'd be like, all right, that's fine if the Bills got that guy.
I think someone like Sam Hartman, if he's available on day 3, like late day 3, I'd be totally cool with that. Very handsome man.
He looks like he was. Yeah, he's a good look. He's no Matt Milano, but my goodness,
like he looks like a cleaner version of Mutt from Schitt's Creek, and he almost looks like a soap opera star in a sense. Like, he looks like the guy that kind of comes around and like ruins 3 different people's marriages in 6 months, like that's sort of what he looks like. I'm not saying that's who he is. I know nothing about Sam Hartman other than the fact that he played quarterback at the University of Notre Dame, but that's the sort of look that he has. I'd like Sam Hartman. Duncan Idaho says Jimmy G's wild younger brother. Such a great description of what he looks like.
Yeah.
That's the sort of player I'd be interested in. I've seen Sam Hartman play. He's tough dude. He can throw the ball decently enough. So yeah, someone like that is what I'd be interested in.
All right. I'd sign up for that without knowing very much at all about Sam Hartman. So
that's fair. Moving on from quarterback, we're gonna talk. Do you want to do running backs or wide receivers?
Let's do running backs. Do that first. Let's get that because the wide receiver will be the big topic. Yeah,
wide receivers is going to be a big topic. So at running back, the Bills currently have James Cook, Pro Bowler. They just cut Nyheim Hines, and they have Darrington. Is that Darrington Evans?
Yep, Darrington. Correct. Yep.
Okay, because I know he was on Chicago and played a bit for them this year, but then they brought it back. All right, that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm like a futures deal or something.
Yeah. Okay, that makes sense. He looked good in the preseason, and like in the couple of opportunities he had with Chicago, like all things considered, not bad, right? For like third, fourth string running back. Yeah, so a good thing there. So with Cook and Evans, there's clearly a gap, right? And I think that you could bring back Ty Johnson, who's scheduled to be an unrestricted free agent. Ty Johnson played well for this team, limited touches, made the most of them in the second half of the season. But I think regardless, I don't know if I feel great about Ty Johnson as like a running back 2 necessarily. Maybe he's that guy, but I would rather bring in someone else, whether that's through free agency or through the draft. One guy that I've been kind of pounding the table for, even a bit gently. It's just like a very gentle, thing. Not like the fist, like full fisted, but just like this guy. Is Ezekiel Elliott. He was with the Patriots last year. The Patriots were just kind of a mess as a whole last year, but Elliott still showed that he can play, or at least to me, it seems like he can still play. The thing with me is that he can do the sort of things that Cook can't do as well, which is being physical in the box. He can still catch the ball really well. He's a very natural, smooth receiver, but he's also a very, very good pass protector. I love the fact that he's a very good pass protector. So I think that having his skill set married with James Cook and his skill set really makes me feel comfortable about the Bills running back room moving forward. We'll get more into guys in the draft and all that, but I think that for the running back position, like there needs to be something else here other than James Cook and potentially Ty Johnson coming back.
Yeah, I mean, I would like Ty Johnson back. I'd be interested to see what he's looking for. And he's not going to get big money basically anywhere, but what's his minimum that he'll take? And does anybody offer him maybe a little bit more because they like what they saw in Buffalo and they want him as their RB2? Like he's not an RB1, but he proved to be like a solid depth running back and did well for the Bills. But for Buffalo, like from the free agency market, there's really not many. Ezekiel Elliott is interesting to me too. I do like his pass pro. Like he's a very good pass protector. He'll get down and dirty in the backfield and protect Josh Allen. There's a couple other names that kind of stood out to me. AJ Dillon, just the thick runner out of the backfield, would kind of be nice. Antonio Gibson, I don't understand him as a football player at all. I don't understand how his rookie year he was so good and then he just doesn't exist anymore. Maybe we can get a little bit of juice out of that. And then there was one other player. I just lost where it was. Sorry. I don't remember who the other one I wanted. But Antonio Gibson always intrigues me just because I'm so confused by him as a player.
Let me help your confusion here. He's a former wide receiver who learned how to play running back in the NFL, and that's exactly how he plays. Like really good receiving skills. I still remember that screen, that like 70 something yard screen he took to the house against the Bills a couple of years ago. But like, I don't know, man. Like, there's a reason why Brian Robinson got the carries over him when he was in Washington. So that's not intriguing to me.
So one thing with that though, So James Cook, when we drafted him, right, the one thing that I was told was that he's a great receiving back. We'll have to see how he is as a runner. And what I've seen to this point so far, is he a much better runner than receiver. The dude's got bricks for hands. He's got to figure that out this year because it got bad last year. Like we all or a lot of Bills fans clowned on Gabe Davis for his drops, which to a point was an issue for Gabe Davis. Sure. James Cook's hands are way worse than Gabe Davis's ever were in major situations too.
Yeah, it's weird because like there are times where James Cook will make catches that are difficult to make, especially for a running back to make, and he makes those catches, and then it's just the most easy or just like this is a catch you should be able to make given what you're capable of doing as a receiver, and he just does not make those, and it's bizarre. That's more confusing to me than Antonio Gibson as a player, right? Like, I can't make sense of how James Cook can't get those catches, can't have that consistency as a catcher. But I think regardless, though, you need to be able to find somebody else to pair with him, even if it's just to spell him for whatever reps you need him for that game, right? Like I'm not in favor of giving James Cook like 25, 30 carries a game. That would be ridiculous. But if you give him 15 to 20 and you give another guy 5 to 7 or whatever on a real run heavy sort of day, I'm good with that.
Yeah. And the other one was Donta Foreman, just big, thick running back. That's what I'm kind of looking for out of the backfield is James Cook has that scat ability, has that kind of breakaway ability. I want a bigger back so we don't have to put Josh Allen on, under center on 3rd and 1 and say, just bull rush through this. Like you find a way to get it. I want to get past that because I'm nervous that one of these times somebody's just going to gouge his eyeball out in the bottom of the pile.
Is Deontay Foreman a free agent?
Spot Rack has him listed as one.
I'll have to look into that because I thought, oh wait, no, yes, he is. He is an unrestricted free agent. I thought he had a 2-year deal with Chicago, but apparently I'm wrong. I'm misremembering. I'm gaslighting myself. I'm crazy. I should cancel myself. Anyway, so moving on to sure, let's go to fullback. Reggie Gilliam's there, and he should stay there. Anyway, moving on to tight ends. Do we want to do tight ends before we do wide receiver?
Yeah, do it because it'll take like 5 seconds. Yeah.
So, as much as I'm sure some people would probably like to move on from Dawson Knox, I don't think that's really in the cards, and I don't think it should be either. Yes, he did not have the best season in the world last season. Injury didn't help. I get all that. I think he's still capable of having some really good seasons in Buffalo. I'm a big believer in Dalton Kincaid as well. I think they pair very well together. I'm looking forward to seeing what these two can do together when they're healthy, and it's gonna be good. It's gonna be good.
Yeah, Kincaid, I think his target share is only going to go up as kind of Josh builds that trust with him. And he was very good his rookie season and to a point overshadowed by Sam Laporta. But Dalton Kincaid had a phenomenal rookie season, especially for a tight end. And to your point with Dawson Knox, like it was a rough season. The hand injury definitely played a role in those drops. Not that he's always been the most sure-handed player, but there's still talent there. Like, he's still a top 30 tight end in the NFL. He's not some like 80th ranked tight end. He can still produce. He can still be a red zone threat. He can run block decently. Like I'm fine with Dawson Knox being on the Bills this year, especially because his dead cap is $20 million, which we're just not going to get out from under at this point. We'll see next year, but hopefully the Bills 12 personnel kind of takes off this year with a healthy Dawson Knox and Dalton Kincaid.
Yeah, I think that you'll see more of that personnel group really working and shining together, especially since they will be bringing in, I assume they'll be bringing in a rookie wide receiver, one would think, given all the meetings that they've had with upcoming rookies, that they'll look to bring someone in, and having a personnel grouping that you feel comfortable with Knox and Kincaid obviously you would have Diggs and Cook or whatever running back on the field at that time as well. And then another wide receiver, whether that's Shakir or whoever this rookie is, like, you feel more comfortable with that. And I think getting rid of Dawson Knox just sort of creates a hole where you don't need to have a hole. It doesn't make sense to create a hole there. So, that all said now, let's talk about wide receivers. So, right now, the Bills have this guy named Stefon Diggs. Doesn't seem like he wants to be here, but they can't really do anything now. I really think Stefon Diggs is going to be here. There's nothing they can do about it. There's nothing Stefon Diggs can really do about it. And I think Stefon Diggs wants to be here. So, let's kill that before it becomes a thing. You've got Khalil Shakir, Deontay Hardy still on the roster. KJ Hamler was someone that they signed to like a futures deal or whatever. Justin Shorter was draft pick last year. Andy Isabella, and Tyrell Shavers, and somebody Brian Thompson. Yeah. There's always one guy whose first name I just do not know. So for me, Diggs, Shakir, and Shorter feel like I feel the most confident of them being on the roster in 2024. Deontay Hardy's where I start to have questions because he was not good last year. He had the 95-yard punt return, which was great against the Dolphins. He at times would come up with a big play, but I don't know. It never felt like the Bills got what they wanted out of him. And it seemed like he was frustrated with his role under Ken Dorsey. It didn't look like it changed at all with Joe Brady as the play caller. So I don't know if Brady has a plan in mind for Deontay Hardy and wants to keep him around. If the Bills want to get rid of Deontay Hardy, that's actually something that could help them because of the way that they structured that contract. They did not give him a lot of guaranteed money. They gave him a lot of incentive-based language in his contract. So if they cut him pre-June 1st, they would save about $4.3 million, which I'd be okay with it. And I understand, as Michael Barber says, be a kick return guy. You need a kick return guy. I get that. I also think you can find kick return guys that are capable, if nothing else, at any point in free agency or in the draft. I think those sorts of guys are just out there. At the very least, you'd have Khalil Shakir. And while I wouldn't love the idea of having someone like Khalil Shakir back there because of the way that I think that he will be important to this offense moving forward, I don't necessarily want somebody of that kind of importance fielding punts and kicks. Maybe it just doesn't matter because maybe you just tell him to fair catch it and move on from there. But I think this is an area, a position where the Bills are probably going to look more into the draft than they are into free agency. Because right now, a lot of the top tier guys on the market are being taken off of the market. T. Higgins is getting tagged. Michael Pittman is either getting an extension or tagged. Mike Evans just re-signed this morning for big money too, like a 2-year, $50+ million deal. So good for him. But those were sort of the biggest names in the wide receiver market coming into this. And now that they're off the market, it means Gabe Davis kind of seems like the biggest name out there. Maybe you could make a case for Michael Thomas, but I'm not going to be the one to make that case for Michael Thomas at this point of his career. Same sort of thing with like Odell Beckham. Tyler Boyd is nice, but he's not the guy, right? Like, and to a point, obviously, Gabe Davis is not like the guy, but in terms of a free agency player, he probably kind of is. And if he's the biggest name out there, he's going to get a lot of money.
Yeah, I mean, he could push. I mean, I still think it would be crazy if he pushed 20 million or gets close to it. I just don't think he's that level of player, but he's good enough to get paid, and there's just not a good market right now. There's not a good amount of players on the market because they're all getting kind of pulled up by their current teams, whether that be Mike Evans or T. Higgins. For me, when it comes to the wide receiver position for the Bills, looking at free agency doesn't excite me at all because I don't see anybody on the free agency list where I'm like, yeah, our offense will be better or like significantly better if we bring that guy in as compared to last year. That's why I would be more inclined to say the Bills have to take a wide receiver in the first 2 days of the draft. Like they have to. If the Bills go through their first 3 rounds of the draft and don't have a wide receiver, I'll be frustrated with Brandon Beane. For the free agents, again, there's not really anybody, but we did talk about return a little bit. I do like Braxton Berrios. He was an all-pro returner. He does have a little bit of speed. If you can get him cheap, and he shouldn't cost too much money. And just really quick on the topic of return, like the NFL is doing away with the kicker. Like it doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Teams average 1 kick return a game. Like, so we can just pretend like that doesn't exist because that's what the NFL wants to do, much to my own chagrin. So you need a guy that can return punts reliably. And Braxton Berrios is a better punt returner than he is a kick returner. I'd be perfectly fine if the Bills threw him one of those $1.7 million contracts and just said, you're our punt returner. That's your job here. Maybe we got a couple gadget plays for you. But other than that, we really don't have much for you here. And they move on from Deontay Hardy and kind of switch out those 2 players for a little bit of cap savings.
Yeah, I think that you're totally right when it comes to special teams. Like kick returning just doesn't really matter at this point. And as far as punt returns go, if that's your main concern when retaining a player, honestly, so be it, and just get rid of him. Like that should not be the primary reason why you keep someone, right? Like unless we're talking about a Devin Hester type of player, which Deontay Hardy is not. It just sort of feels like money can be better spent elsewhere. So as far as other players that could be worthwhile bringing in free agency, someone that's on that I like and but is also not really it's not an unrestricted free agent. He's a restricted free agent. So the Bills would have to offer a tender or a contract equivalent to a tender or something like that. The different styles of free agency are dumb and annoying. But Jauan Jennings with the Niners is very interesting. I really like him. It felt like any Niners game I watched, he would come up with 3 catches that were like critical catches. Yep. And in the Super Bowl, if the Niners had won, he would have been the MVP by far in my mind. I like Jauan Jennings, but I don't think he's gonna really be somebody that teams are going to like clamor for and try and pry him away from the Niners so hard that the Niners can't bring him back. So as outside of that, I mean, it really becomes a whole lot of, it's a mishmash of like, okay, sure, I'll take that guy, I guess. Like Cedric Wilson or Kendrick Bourne. Like these guys have had their moments in the NFL, but I don't necessarily feel confident in them being like major contributors in their time right now. Curtis Samuel might be a type of guy that I would actually be excited for, especially given that he's had his best season with Joe Brady in Carolina when he was the play caller there. But outside of that, there's nothing that really moves the needle for me unless you really want to shell out a bunch of money for like a Marquise Brown or a Calvin Ridley. And I don't want to give money to Calvin Ridley because he's so freaking inconsistent. And Marquise Brown, I mean, great deep threat, super fast, but injuries have been a problem for him since he's been in the NFL. So I think you're better served if you're the Bills to go into the draft with wide receiver being one of your top priorities as opposed to paying an older player and hoping that that works out for you. And especially given the immense depth at wide receiver in this rookie class, I think you'd be doing yourself a disservice by just sort of overlooking that particular pool of talent. It wouldn't make sense. Whereas with something like defensive line, like we talked about last week with defensive line, where yes, it's a lot of 30-year-olds, but they will be able to contribute to your team right now. And probably not cost the money that a lot of these wide receivers would. Where, like, getting a day 2 wide receiver, you're probably potentially getting a day 1 starter that is also going to be, relative to the market, very cheap.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it all comes to like roster building strategy too, right? Like the Bills could go get a Curtis Samuel, they could go get some of those other players. The only concern I have with that is how much of an upgrade are they over Khalil Shakir, right? Because the Bills, how much can they get 4 receivers on the field if they're running 12 personnel at a fairly high clip compared to the rest of the NFL? And the reason I say 4 wide receivers is because I fully expect Stefon Diggs to be on the field. I fully expect Khalil Shakir to get more snaps this season than he did last season because, quite honestly, he earned it, much to my surprise, but that's a great surprise for the Bills. And then you say there's this free agent player, and the Bills have to draft a wide receiver. So if you bring in like a decent name free agent and you draft a wide receiver, one of them just not going to see the field enough to make it really make sense. And with Stefon Diggs getting older and kind of the way the Bills roster is currently set up, I feel like they really need to focus on that wide receiver 2 spot being a draft pick over trying to go, like you said, find a Calvin Ridley. Like I don't need to go pay Calvin Ridley because I can feel like I could have a chance at finding someone in the draft that could fit into that similar skill set and that is much cheaper. I have control of for at least 4, maybe 5 years until I have to pay them when Stefon Diggs is off the books. So the draft is the spot for this position. Like the free agency market isn't good enough right now, isn't cheap enough for the Bills to really fit a player in that's going to make them significantly better.
Yep. And we'll talk about some rookies a little bit later, but we're gonna go through the rest of the roster right now. So moving on from wide receivers, we're gonna get into some of the offensive line. So here's the thing with the offensive line. I love watching upcoming offensive linemen. Last year, when the group that from Cover One went to the Senior Bowl, that included me, I spent the entire week watching offensive linemen because I knew that the Bills were going to be looking at offensive linemen. I knew that they wanted to bring in offensive linemen. And I think that right now, the offensive line looks pretty good. So I haven't felt the need to watch a whole lot of offensive linemen. But you have Deion Dawkins at left tackle. You've got, oh my gosh, my brain. I have this brought up for a reason. Here we go. Connor McGovern at left guard, who they paid last year in free agency. You have Mitch Morse at center. You have Osiris Torrance, their second-round pick, at right guard. And you have Spencer Brown at right tackle. All of them, on the whole, played very well. This is definitely the best offensive line that Josh Allen has had since he's been in the NFL. It's a group that worked really well together. They all seem to play well together. They stayed healthy through all 17 games, which is very important. It's also something that's probably not going to happen again, right? Like, they're all under contract, but having all of them play all 17 games together seems almost impossible to do. In fact, it's astounding that they were able to do it last year, especially given all the injuries that happened to the Bills during the season. It's a little miraculous that this offensive line stayed together the entire time, but it's probably not going to happen again. So what are the contingencies if that doesn't happen? Well, you have Ryan Vandermark, who during the preseason actually seemed to play pretty well. He's the backup. He's one of the backup tackles. You have Ryan Bates, who has played guard. He's played center for this team, looked and started for this team, right? Like, this is somebody who the Bears were willing to give a pretty good contract to last year, and the Bills ended up matching it and bringing him back. It's somebody that they feel really comfortable with. Alec Anderson is listed as the backup center officially. Ryan Garage, is that his name?
Yeah.
Ryan?
Yeah. Yep.
Garage. A lot of people liked him in the preseason, still on this team. You have Tommy Doyle, who is coming off of another injury. I don't feel great about that. And you have Kevin Jarvis.
Yeah, very good. Yeah.
Oh, look at that. Look at that. Had to get one right eventually. So one of the names that intrigues me as a free agent is somebody who was on this roster, and that's David Edwards, because I feel like David Edwards is a really solid player. Ever since he's been in the NFL, he's just been a very smooth, solid player. And assuming he doesn't have like a big free agent market, and assuming the rumors of him coming back maybe subscribe to One Pass, and maybe those rumors are a little stronger in your mind than they are right now. Just a thought, $60 a year, go sign up right now. Yeah, it seems like, if we're reading the tea leaves, that David Edwards is probably on his way back to Buffalo, which is a good thing, because if somebody goes down, God forbid, knock on wood, all that good stuff, that I would feel comfortable with David Edwards being slotted into that spot. And if somebody else goes down, I also feel comfortable with Ryan Bates being, assuming it's the interior, I feel like comfortable with Ryan Bates being slotted into another spot. The tackles, we can feel good about Ryan Vandermark, and there was a time, I think, in that Dolphins game where Dawkins got hurt, and DeMarc came in and was in there for like a whole drive, a whole scoring drive, I want to say, and played well, or at least well enough to where it was a question of like, who was it on that drive? Was that Vandermark or was Dawkins out there? Like, I'm not 100%. Like, it worked. It worked out well. And I think all of this to say, like, it goes back to Aaron Kromer being the type of offensive line coach that he is. He's not just a name. He is who we think he is. Like, he is a great offensive line coach, and he gets guys to play at a high level. Even guys that don't necessarily fit exactly what he wants in an offensive lineman, right? We've talked about this with Osiris Torrance. Osiris Torrance is not his type of offensive lineman, but he made him into a legitimately solid starting offensive lineman as a rookie. And I think that matters.
Yeah, for the offensive line, like, the starters are locked in. I think the only one I have a question about, and the only reason I have a question is because of cap issues, is Mitch Morris. Now, I'm not subscribing to the idea that the Bills should cut Mitch Morris to save money. I'm not subscribing to the idea that Mitch Morris is going to retire. Like, none of that has been substantiated yet, but he does have an $11.5 million cap hit. His dead cap is only $3 million, so you can save 8.5 there. But he is a captain of this team. He is kind of this voice of reason at times and voice of maturity. Like, whenever you see the interviews with the players, all the guys are like, "Oh, I'm going to go home and play Fortnite tonight." And Mitch Morris is like, "Dude, I'm going home, hanging out with my kids. Like, I'm going to be in bed by 8 p.m. So I think that's good to have in the locker room. I also think Mitch Morris is a very good center. But I do wonder what the future of that position is. So, Ryan Bates is constantly brought up as like, oh, he's the heir apparent to Mitch Morris. But let's say, for instance, Mitch Morris does play this year. Next year, he retires or what have you. Then we have Ryan Bates kind of slot into that center role. Well, Ryan Bates is on a 1-year deal, and he's closing 30 really quick. I personally believe that the Bills need to draft a center at some point in this draft. I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the 3rd round, which I'm sure a lot of Bills fans would be pissed off about, but just like they were pissed off about Terrell Bernard and what have you. But I do think that center is something to kind of start looking for, because it's such an important position, especially for a player like Josh Allen that likes to kind of get behind the center at points and run right down the middle. I don't really know what else to think of the offensive line, especially the reserve players. Like, Ryan Vandermark might be good enough to get by if, say, Dawkins goes down for a game or two. I don't want to play that game, though, because I know how good Deion
Right.
Dawkins is, and I know that we're not going to have a backup that's remotely as good as he is.
So, with regards to Spencer Brown, he's now had 3 years in the NFL. Last year was easily his best year. Moving into year 4, there'll be his contract year. Do we think the Bills bring him back after 2024 to be the starting right tackle for this team?
I would not be stunned if they work on an extension with him prior to this season. I say that because I think that the Bills have this fear of not protecting Josh Allen. And at points, Josh Allen can't protect himself. But they now are starting to get to a point where what we saw from last year from Spencer Brown, do they believe it's sustainable or not? If they do believe it's sustainable, do they extend him prior to seeing one more good season of that style play? The only problem is I'm looking at right tackle pay, like average salaries. They used to be fairly low. Now they're pretty wild, dude. Like, I mean, Lane Johnson, $20.1 million. Yeah.
I mean, after you pay Jauan Taylor a boatload of money to be one of the worst right tackles in the NFL, I mean, it's just, Spencer Brown has definitely improved during his time here, especially after that second year where it really looked like this was going to be a bit of a train wreck sort of pick. He's brought himself back. He stayed healthy. He had a whole regular offseason with Cromer. That all is fine, but got to stay healthy, right? That's going to be a big thing for him. He's had, back issues, which for people that are over 300 pounds, not a great thing. Or so I've been told. Back, knee, and heart issues when for 300 plus pounders, not good. Red flag with them. But I'm kind of torn on how to address a Spencer Brown extension, because in general, you want to be out ahead of these, because the earlier you get these extensions done, the less money you have to spend, right? Because one extension leads to another extension being bigger and another extension being bigger. Like when the Bills signed Trey White from that great cornerback group that had Marlon Humphrey and Marshawn Lattimore, you had Trey White in there as well. You get Trey White in there decently early before Marshawn Lattimore and Marlon Humphrey get paid. And, well, Marshawn Lattimore's on the trade block right now, apparently. And Marlon Humphrey is, a very, very good player for the Ravens. So you want to be able to get out ahead of these things. But how confident are you in having him be a part of this offense for the long term? And if we believe in Aaron Cromer being this sort of offensive line guru that he is, and you feel like he's part of the coaching staff's long-term plans, you could bring in somebody else, theoretically, that he can coach up, and that probably works out. But that's also the mystery box element, right? It goes back to that classic Family Guy clip. Well, hold on, Lois. A boat is a boat, but the mystery box could be anything. It could even be a boat. Like, we could have Spencer Brown, but we could have the mystery box. It could even be Spencer Brown. Like, it's just, it's tricky. And this is part of roster management. And obviously the Bills are inside the building. They have a greater understanding of who Spencer Brown is, where he is at, medically speaking, and even mentally speaking, and physically. Like, all of that is available to them. They know this more than the rest of us do. And if they feel confident in Spencer Brown, I will probably feel confident in Spencer Brown if they re-sign him to an extension in this offseason. If they don't, and they play this out, then I'll also feel relatively confident in them finding a replacement as well. So it would suck to have to do that, right? Because it would probably have to be a rookie again. But it is what it is. And I think that at the end of the day, you kind of get away with doing whatever you need, whatever you feel like you have to do is probably going to end up being the right decision.
Yeah. I was kind of peeking through contracts here, just thinking like, in theory, if they do extend Spencer Brown, what would it look like? And the one name I kept coming back to was Austin Jackson, the Dolphins' right tackle.
Yeah.
So Austin Jackson signed an extension in December, which maybe that's a strategy the Bills can kind of play around with a little bit, is say, oh, we've seen a season of you, our second season. It's almost done. A second season of you playing well. We'll give you an extension in December, though I'm pretty sure Brandon Beane rarely does in-season extensions. But 3 years, an average of $12 million a year, kind of a get out after the first year, with a decent kind of cap savings compared to dead cap hit. Maybe that's where we live with a player like Spencer Brown, is that $12 million number a year, which is, it just sounds really, really big for a cap hit, but that's the market now. Like, Austin Jackson is the 12th highest paid right tackle in the NFL, and he's $3 million less per year than number 11. That's Jack Conklin.
Yeah. So it's tricky. It's going to be a tricky thing for them to navigate, but I think ultimately, whatever decision they make, I'll probably end up feeling pretty confident that that is the right decision for them. So, yeah, it is what it is. We're going to move into, we've already kind of talked about free agents, so I kind of want to focus this next section into just the draft, especially with the combine having just wrapped up. Just the tip of canoe says, one thing I'm confident in is we won't bring back Cody Ford. Certainly right about that. Boy, Cody Ford, that feels like a lifetime ago now. Man, jeez. Yeah, so let's talk about some of these draft guys, and let's start with wide receivers. Let's have fun. Let's have some fun, because this wide receiver class is ridiculous. When I was putting together like a short list of guys that I wanted to watch when we wrapped up last week in order to prepare for this week in this conversation, I was like, okay, as much as I want to talk about guys like Malik Neighbors and Roma Dunze and Marvin Harrison Jr. and watch those guys because I'm sure it would be fun, there's also no point in watching those guys because they're never, ever going to be in a position to draft any of those three guys unless they just sold the farm in order to trade up to get there, which I don't think they're going to do either. So I was like, okay, we'll get rid of those guys and we'll talk about, I was like, okay, well, what about this guy? Okay, well, this guy and this guy and this guy. I put together a list of like 10 players. I'm like, how are there like 13 players that at this position that could get taken in the first like 50 picks? Like, this is ridiculous. I mean, it's actually insane. So the 10 that I put together, I'll list them off. We'll talk about whoever we want to talk about. I'm sure you have your guys as well as I have mine. But the 10 that I wrote down initially were Keon Coleman, Ladd McConkey. I keep wanting to say McConkey. I know that's wrong. I know I'm thinking of some other player whose last name is McConkey, I'm sure. But Ladd McConkey, Roman Wilson, Brandon Rice, Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Legette, Javon Baker, Jamari Thrash, Adonai Mitchell, and Xavier Worthy. So, let's start. Do you have somebody you want to start with?
I want to start with Keon Coleman.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, I had the combine on and off this past week, and the one thing that obviously made just headlines was, Keon Coleman ran slow in the 40. And what was it? He ran a 4.62 or something?
It was a 4.62, I believe. I think that was unofficial. I think his official was 4.61. No?
Yeah.
Maybe? Something like that. It was.
4.61. Very nice.
4.61.
I used to be very maybe into the 40-yard dash. Like, I got to see the speed numbers. And it's fun. It really, truly is a fun, cool part of the NFL Combine. I just don't think it matters. And the more and more I think about it, the more and more I hear certain players. So this is a little bit different than Keon Coleman, but I heard Alex Smith, of all people, talk about the 40-yard dash and how stupid it was. He said in his life, he had never been in a three-point stance. He didn't know why he was doing it. He ran the 40, whatever number he got, I guess was decent at the time. He also never ran the 40-yard dash again. He said, I don't do that. Why am I doing this? And when you think of a wide receiver like Keon Coleman getting down to that stance, how many times in Keon Coleman's career is he going to be in that stance, trying to explode out of that stance to run as fast as he can for 40 yards? Very, very rarely, if ever. And then meanwhile, you saw the, what's the name of it? The gauntlet drill?
Yeah.
Where he reached an insanely high top speed.
It was like 20 miles per hour, one of the top times in the entire class, which is saying something. So
legit speed.
Legit speed, legit playing speed.
Exactly.
And this is, I made sure to look this up. I like literally a minute before we went live, I made sure to look this up. There's a great clip last year from when the Rams drafted Puka Nacua. And Les Snead, the general manager, and a scout were talking about him. And the scout was like, where do you think BYU is going to go? BYU referring to Puka Nacua because that's where he went to school. And they were kind of went back and forth a little bit. And the scout said, yeah, but he tested really poorly. And Les Snead just said, look, he's kind of got that Alec Ogletree in him. And at first I was like, hold on, Alec Ogletree was a terrible player who was in this league for way longer than he should have been. I don't know what you're talking about here. But the point he was trying to make was that Alec Ogletree didn't really test well when he was at the combine. If you ask him to do a 40-yard dash, he's not going to run super, super fast. But you put him in that sort of competition setting, you put him on the field, he's going to chase the rabbit, he's going to run, he's going to do exactly what you want him to do. It's just that the 40-yard dash is not the best indicator for who he is. And I think that Les Snead also referred to like the GPS tracking data, this sort of mile per hour thing that they had on Puka Nacua that suggested like this 40-yard dash is not really indicative of his actual playing speed. And lo and behold, Puka Nacua has one of the greatest rookie seasons for a wide receiver anybody has ever seen. Mm-hmm. And part of that has to do with the fact that Stafford was better than we assumed he was going to be and healthier than we assumed he was going to be. And McVay is a great offensive play caller and designer and puts his guys in a position to succeed. Regardless of all of that, though, like Puka Nacua is a good player just on his own. That was clear watching the tape from people who watched him last year. I'm not going to pretend I knew who Puka Nacua was. As soon as he caught like 14 passes in week 1, I was like, waiver wire. Let me see who this guy is in my fantasy league. He won at least one, if not 2 different fantasy leagues for me. Like him basically alone. But like he is a good player on his own. Adding him to these sort of offenses where you have really smart play callers and really good quarterbacks, like this is how you get like late round picks to work for you, or just like picks that people are like, I don't know about this. He needs this. Really what they're trying to say is, I don't feel good about this player in a vacuum, but that's not how we should view this. It's a way to view it. But as far as how successful they're going to be in the NFL, it's not the main focus. It shouldn't be, well, it has to depend on the team that he goes to. Of course it does. Mm-hmm. Of course that's part of this. That's the whole point of this whole process and exercise. Of course it depends on the team he goes to. If you put Keon Coleman into some of these offenses in the NFL, of course he's not going to succeed. It doesn't make any sense. But if you put him on the Bills, oh my God, I would feel great about that. I know Keon Coleman, not personally. That's not what I don't know. That sounded like I had some sort of like personal relationship with Keon Coleman. That'd be really cool, and we would have him on. I would like bring him onto the podcast right now, but I don't have that right now. But I know Keon Coleman because I'm a Michigan State fan. He was at Michigan State. He played football and basketball there, by the way. And playing for Tom Izzo in college basketball is not some easy feat. Like that's not a thing that should be overlooked. And the fact that he went to Florida State and had the year that he had playing football, it just speaks to his overall athletic ability, even if it doesn't show up in these sort of I'll say it, kind of antiquated testing, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's ways that these testing numbers are used in order to create predictive models and all that, and that's fine. I'm all for that. But the testing itself is pretty old. Like, the idea of running a 40-yard dash, I think, came from Paul Brown, if I'm remembering correctly. And yeah, God bless him. A lot of these coaches, a lot of the best coaches in NFL history are guys that were clearly ahead of their time. Bill Walsh, Vince Lombardi, Paul Brown, like all these guys deservedly get their honors because they were just so much smarter and more innovative and more well-thinking than a lot of their peers. But that was also like 60, 70, 60, 50, 40 years ago, whatever, right? Like, we need to be able to incorporate some of the technology that's available and some of the other data and numbers that are available in order to come up with something that is more predictive. Now, part of that problem, and I know we're not talking about Keon Coleman as much. I'm going on a rant. Let me do this for just another minute. I promise we'll get back to this. But part of the problem with developing something new is that you no longer have something to predict it back to in terms of historical data, right? Like, part of the point of being like, we feel iffy about Keon Coleman and his 40-yard dash time is because, historically speaking, guys with that 40-yard dash time at his size and length aren't that successful. But if we have access to other data that suggests, hey, maybe that part of it isn't the best way to, like, measure this and measure a player like this, we need to be able to do that. We need to have that sort of balance in terms of how we view players on the whole, right? We can't just sit here and say, well, he didn't test well, but his tape is good. It's like, hold on. He didn't test well according to these tests. What if there's something else we can measure him by that makes sense for the type of player that he is that we see on tape? Does that match up well? Does that match up to what we see? If it does, then that makes sense. If it doesn't, well, then now we can start creating questions about whether or not he'll be successful or not. That's the sort of thing that I've been thinking about ever since I saw. And as soon as I saw 4.62, my first two thoughts within like a second of each other were, oh, it's not a terrible time for him.
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh, people are going to make such a big freaking deal about this.
100%. Yeah. And I wouldn't be surprised. Let's say in a scenario, the Bills do draft Keon Coleman. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a video come out of Brandon Beane, the same exact video he had with Gabe Davis, where he was excited about the bad 40 time because they saw the talent on the film. They saw the ability and they're like, so what? He ran a 4.61. What do I care that he ran a 4.61? Like, I see him play. I see the speed when he plays. And that gauntlet drill, in my opinion, is a much better drill to test speed than the 40-yard dash because at least they're starting out up in the 2-point stance and they're running across the field and catching footballs and keep running. And the fact that he was able
things.
Exactly. And I also add to this too. I saw somebody tweet this out. It'll never happen. The fact that they're not doing this in football pads always pisses me off too, because that completely changes things too. If you put football pads on Keon Coleman, who's 6'3", 210, 215 pounds, yeah, it's not going to affect him as much as if you put football pads on a Xavier Worthy, let's say, who weighs 165 pounds.
Yeah.
So Xavier Worthy, who 4.21 is blazed. That's insane. You put pads on him, he's going to slow down a little bit. He's still going to be freakishly fast, but he's going to slow down a tad. Keon Coleman's not going to slow down. If anything, he might just speed up because he's on a football field doing football things that he excels at instead of running a 40-yard dash, which you train for like 2 months specifically to do that, and then you never do it again in your life. The 40-yard dash is just something I can't get behind at this point in my life. I just don't really see the value in it to an extent.
Yeah. I really like Keon Coleman. If you throw on, film or just broadcast footage of FSU games, there are times where he just absolutely dominates the field. Just will go up over defenders, has great hands, really just a great receiver. If the Bills end up taking Keon Coleman at the end of the first round, I would love that. I would be all in on that. I'm just a big fan of Keon Coleman. I think the overreaction to his 40 time will probably dissipate over time. I'm hoping. I think people will probably go back to the tape. There will probably be other, things that come out over the course of the next month or so that will suggest, a sort of course correction for Keon Coleman. But at the end of the day, I think that he will probably be a first round pick. I'd be kind of surprised that he will not, if he's not a first round pick. Somebody that people are talking about in this chat. First of all, thank you all for being in this chat and keeping it hot. It is popping in here. Love it. Let's talk about Lad McConkey, because I really want to talk about
Gym
Lad
Rat,
McConkey.
Right? That scrappy gym rat.
Listen, maybe he is, maybe he isn't, but it's not because he's white. Like, I'm just going to say, just because he's white does not mean that he's a slot receiver, because this man, according to the data that we have available, played like 70% of the time outside in the SEC. That's a big deal. That's a pretty big deal. And he won. He won on the outside. You put on Georgia tape, you put on Georgia broadcast, you just watch 84 for the Bulldogs. This dude is smooth. He's precise. He's intelligent. Everything is very purposeful. There's no real wasted movement when he runs routes. It is just fantastic stuff. And it's not just that he's sure-handed. It's not just that he's a good route runner. It's not just that he was on a very successful team, the most successful team in college football for the last 3 years. He also has speed. And it's not like sneaky speed. It's legit breakaway speed. You watch him against Florida, he is breaking away from defensive backs, SEC defensive backs. This is a legitimate receiver who was underutilized because Georgia just has talent galore and is a run the ball first type of team, that he didn't get featured as much as a Keon Coleman or an Xavier Legette or a Brian Thomas Jr. or Xavier Worthy and Adonai Mitchell. It's just not who they were as a team. But it's really great. He is now somebody, he is in the past somebody that would have probably just gotten overlooked. And I don't know why or how people have been able to really lock into this guy and say, no, this dude is worthy of a late first, early second round pick. But it's true. He is worthy of that pick. He is a very, very good receiver. And I feel very, very confident in him being a legitimately top tier wide receiver on this team right now.
Yeah, I think, it's funny, the all the terminology we use for a player like Lad McConkey. I also think his name kind of helps people not overlook him. The fact that his name is Lad McConkey, which is just so wild of a name, that people are always going to remember it. The one thing that I do find interesting, so for the most part, a lot of people, and rightfully so, are he's not just a slot wide receiver. He can play outside, which is completely true. He played outside more than he played inside in college. I love the fact that he did both. And I think in the Bills offense, that could sneakily work. The reason being, I know Khalil Shakir can play outside. I know he can play inside. I know Stefon Diggs can play outside. I know he can play inside. So now if you have those three wide receivers on the field at all time, you put them into motion. Who's where's everybody? All of a sudden you can create mismatches. Maybe you get the speed on the outside and Lad. Maybe you get Stefon Diggs matched up with a nickel corner that isn't prepared to defend Stefon Diggs. You can do a lot with those players. I'm not getting the pure X receiver I want, which is the Keon Coleman build, right? The 6'3", 215, 220. I kind of want that. If the Bills draft Lad McConkey, I can see a path where all of a sudden their offense is more dynamic and dangerous, and Josh Allen can find a way to get the ball into Lad McConkey's hands, a player who's frankly just incredibly sure-handed, something that I need the Bills to have because I've seen far too many drops the past couple of years. He's a player that I'd trust to catch the ball if Josh throws an absolute piss missile to him.
Exactly. It's when I looked at him this past week, I was kind of expecting somebody where I was like, okay, this guy is good, but I don't know if I would take him in the first couple rounds. And when I was done watching, I was just like, this dude is just good. This is just a good, like, high level player who clearly, like, thinks about what he does, is really smart. And when I said earlier, right, like he's somebody that is very precise, doesn't have a ton of wasted movement. Everything he does is very purposeful in terms of his route running. Stefon Diggs is also like that. And giving Lad McConkey somebody like Stefon Diggs and having him learn from Stefon Diggs just feels like, to me, a surefire way of having a legitimate contributor from week one as a rookie. And I think that that's such a big deal when you're talking about who you're going to end up taking. Because there are some guys like an Xavier Worthy or Adonai Mitchell, who we'll talk about in a little bit, who need more refinement. And you'll probably have to find ways to manufacture touches for them. But for someone like Lad McConkey, I think that's somebody you just sort of plug and play right away. And there was someone in here who said, Carl Toman, thank you for watching. ESPN's Kirk Herbstreit sees Lad McConkey looking like this year's Puka Nacua. That's probably an overstatement, but yeah, I mean, in a sense, yes, right? Like, this is just somebody who, like, we can all sort of look now in hindsight and be like, okay, who is somebody that maybe got a little overlooked based on production or whatever? And, like, he was not very productive in college. He just wasn't. And that's fine. That's okay. Like, you can find ways to not be productive in college and then turn that into being a legitimately good player in the NFL. I think Lad McConkey could very easily. In fact, I would be surprised, nay, shocked, if Lad McConkey is not a legitimately good, if not great, starting wide receiver in this NFL. MC says, smash the like button, people. There are 100 people in this video right now. They're watching us live. First of all, thank you very much. Love having 100 plus people watching this show in the off season. Really appreciate all of you. Yes, hit that like button if you haven't. It's so important for algorithms and stupid crap like that, and it's very helpful, and it's a great way to support us. Moving on to do we want to do Javon Baker or Brian Thomas Jr.? I'll let you pick.
Brian, do Brian Thomas.
Okay, so Brian Thomas Jr. played number 2 to Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors, who some people are saying is not just potentially the best wide receiver in this class against Marvin Harrison Jr. So there's some people who are saying that Malik Neighbors is the best wide receiver LSU has ever put out, which would include people like Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson and Odell Beckham Jr. Like, there are some people that I respect that think very, very highly of Malik Neighbors. Now, Malik Neighbors is not somebody that the Bills are going to get. Yeah. But Brian Jr. might be. And I felt a little more confident about that before he ran a 4.340 at 200 plus pounds. One of the comps that seems to go around, I know Eric has made this comp. I know that John Ledyard has made this comp. Martavis Bryant. And when you watch Brian Thomas Jr. at LSU this past year, and you have in your mind Martavis Bryant, if you remember Martavis Bryant, played for the Steelers, got traded to the Raiders, had some injuries and off-field issues, kind of flamed out. But when he was playing, he was as explosive as any receiver was in the NFL. And skinny, fast, long, built well enough. Brian Thomas Jr. reminds me so much of Martavis Bryant. It's actually a little scary. And if that's who the Bills end up falling in love with, if maybe they feel like, hey, this is worth trading up for, I'm kind of into that idea. And like Brian Thomas Jr., there will be frustrating moments with Brian Thomas Jr., whether it's because he's not running the right route, or maybe he's not running it the way they want him to, or maybe just a drop. And I would be frustrated with that. But the ability that he brings, the speed that he brings, the explosiveness that he brings, he chews up the open field like nothing. He covers so much ground so quickly. It's kind of crazy. Again, this speaks to the depth of this class, that this is somebody that could end up being like a late first round pick. This is potentially somebody that in a lot of ways, Brian Thomas Jr. fits exactly the type of player that the Bills like to take, which is somebody that is physically talented, but not all the way put together, right? Like Greg Rousseau was that type of guy. Ed Oliver was that type of guy. Tremaine Edmonds, Josh Allen. These are the sorts of players that they like to take because they feel very confident in their ability to coach and refine balls of clay, essentially.
Mm.
So that to me kind of suggests like, hey, like if we're talking on a predictive level, like Brian Thomas Jr. should be on people's short list on who the Bills would probably be interested in because of that. He has the physical gifts that they like. He feels the need that they like, feels the need that they really have to address in the draft, and is probably going to be in that sort of position where either they stay at 28 and maybe certain things happen and he just happens to fall to 28, or he gets to a point where they feel comfortable trading up in order to get him. I'm very interested in the idea of Brian Thomas Jr. being on the Buffalo Bills.
Yeah, and he fits two things that I want for the Bills. So we just talked about Keon Coleman at the start of this, right? And I had mentioned like he's more of that typical X receiver. He has that body, that frame, that build, that 6'3", 210. Like that's right where Brian Thomas is too. So not only do I get that X, but I also get that deep threat too, something that the Bills really haven't ever had in the Josh Allen era. So we've never really seen him able to consistently air it out to a guy that can take the top off of defense. Running a 4.34 at 6'3", 210 is significantly more impressive to me than running a 4.21 at 165 pounds. So when I compare him to a player like Xavier Worthy, no, I'll sign up for Brian Thomas any day of the week over these smaller, more gadgety type players. The one thing that does concern me that you said is there's going to be frustrating moments, whether that's the wrong route, maybe a drop or two. I guess I can live with that if I see that explosiveness that literally every single scouting report kind of gushes about with Brian Thomas Jr.
And this is the thing with players who have issues with drops, right? Like, to a point that matters, but it only matters if you're not producing outside of those drops, right? Like, if you're somebody who can just get a couple of explosive plays every game and maybe you drop an easy one here and there, you kind of live with that. But if you're consistently making big plays, if you're consistently drawing attention to you as a receiver and allowing other guys to come open or get one-on-ones, and especially when you have guys like Khalil Shakir, Stefon Diggs, Dalton Kincaid, who can win one-on-ones easily, honestly, on their own, now you're talking about somebody who provides just a different element and a different dynamic for this offense. And Eric has brought up this point that Joe Brady, when we talk about like, what does he want in an offense? What is going to make his offense different than a Ken Dorsey offense? Well, you look at his time in Carolina with Robbie Chosen Anderson or whatever he's calling himself now. You all know who I'm referring to. He had a great season with him. He was a big part of that offense and their success. And that was with Teddy Bridgewater, a quarterback who didn't like to throw deep and wasn't very good at it. So I think that like Brian Thomas Jr. feels, if you're asking me right now, pre-free agency, post-combine, who are the Bills going to take? Brian Thomas Jr. is on my mind right now as one of those guys. I think that is a very strong contender for the Bills in the first round. And I would be pretty ecstatic about that. Not necessarily over the moon. It's also hard to be over the moon about a particular player that gets picked at 28 most of the time.
Yeah.
But that would be about as good as it could get. Like guys like these first three guys, like Brian Thomas Jr., Lad McConkey, Keon Coleman, I'd be good with any of those three guys, and all for different reasons, right? Like Keon Coleman kind of provides, like you talked about, that typical X receiver build and ability. Lad McConkey is just super precise and would be a great complement to what the Bills already have. And Brian Thomas Jr. just gives them a whole other dynamic and element to an offense that really needs it, I think. I think having a legit deep speed threat is important to opening up other areas of this offense.
Yeah.
Moving on to Javon Baker, who I have not looked into as much as I'd like to, but what I have seen, I kind of like. This is somebody that would be like a day 2 type of guy. He's in a weird offense, right? So UCF is coached by Gus Malzahn. Malzahn does a lot of triple option-y sort of stuff, a lot of pulling guards, a lot of RPOs. His quarterback was John Rice Plumlee for a lot of the season. John Rice Plumlee is a great athlete. Really good arm, plays baseball for UCF. Not a great passer necessarily, not the most accurate passer necessarily, but also a really good runner. That's why he works well in that Gus Malzahn offense. But like Javon Baker is somebody that can also provide that sort of explosiveness. This is somebody that was at the Senior Bowl that definitely drew the attention of Eric and Anthony. Go to their Twitters. You will find some really good stuff about Javon Baker and a reason to take Javon Baker. He just has that ability to create big plays. And again, kind of going, if the Bills are not able to take Brian Thomas Jr. or Keon Coleman or even a Lad McConkey, let's say, maybe Lad McConkey's just not their guy, right? And they pass on him. They get somebody else in the first round that isn't Brian Thomas. They miss out on a receiver in the first round. Javon Baker, I would think, would be one of their guys that they would look at on day 2. And as often happens at the start of the second round, right? Trades galore happen at the beginning of the second round. All these players that kind of fall through the first round that teams are looking at like, we really didn't think he was going to be there. We say that about everyone, but we literally didn't think he was going to be available at the top of the second round. We need to get this guy. And they trade and there's all these sorts of moves that happen. That could be a player to me that ends up in that sort of position where teams are like clamoring for Javon Baker, especially if these other guys like Keon Coleman, like Lad McConkey, and Brian Thomas Jr. are not available at the start of the second round, which they probably won't be. Let's be honest with ourselves. There's a good chance that like 6 or 7 receivers get taken in the first round this year, and they will all have fully earned it. Like there is a reason why 6 or 7 receivers will be taken, and those specific 6 or 7 receivers, because they're good. They're good players, or they're just physically gifted, and we'll talk about Xavier Worthy later. But like someone like Javon Baker could be the sort of consolation prize, so to speak. And I feel bad saying that because he's a legitimately good player. He's somebody that could really be another, not quite plug and play, because of the offense that he came from is so different than what gets run in the NFL. But I think you could look at him as sort of like how Gabe Davis was. And I know I'm comparing one UCF receiver to another UCF receiver. I get it. But you could kind of compare Gabe Davis's rookie year to what I think Javon Baker could be as a rookie, where he just sort of works in and finds ways to make big plays, even if he's not like super consistent game to game. He's somebody that I think could end up being the type of player that they pursue if they don't get one of those guys in the first round.
Yeah, and the one thing I'd say is I don't think that the Bills are going to be able to move up in the first round. So why that matters in the context of this conversation is you mentioned those 3 top dudes, Marvin Harrison, Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze. They're not getting them. They're not moving up. They're not selling the house. Right. I know that there's people that have suggested that. That's never going to happen. Brian Thomas Jr., at least on the boards that I'm seeing, he's above that 28 mark. Someone else probably going to snatch him too. So I'm starting to think he doesn't really have a chance. The Keon Coleman situation with his 40-yard dash, maybe he does fall down board. So you might be able to get him at 28 or even trade down. And same with Lad McConkey. Like, I think he's fun. I think he's going to be a really good player, like you said. But I don't know if he'll push up to the first round, let's say. So if you take all of that into consideration, I could see a scenario where the Bills say, okay, we can trade down back out of 28 into the early second round, still get one of these wide receivers in the second round, and get a defensive lineman, which is another position they need. If that happens to be Javon Baker is one of those dudes that they get, a couple other names, which I'm sure you'll bring up, are there in the second round. That might be where they live. And I don't think Bills fans may be as excited if they don't get one of those top 4 dudes, top 3 dudes, but I think that they can find the right player. I would side with the idea of go for the home run, don't go for the double. Like I want if take a risk on a wide receiver, go for the big one, not the one that's safe and feels like it's going to just work out, but not be the greatest thing.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Moving on, somebody that's really interesting to me. I watched a little bit of him last night. Xavier Legette from South Carolina. This is a big, well-built, prototypical-looking receiver. I made the unfortunate mistake of watching probably the worst combination of games possible to watch him. So I started with him versus Missouri, and I got so confused because I'm like, he's barely involved in this offense. What are we talking about with this guy? I looked it up. He had an injury that week. He had a hand injury that week. And so I don't know if he was suffered before the game and he tried to go and it didn't really work. I don't know if it got suffered during the game. I didn't look that far into it. But I was like, okay, all right, let me move on to a different game. So then I watched him versus Georgia. And he had a couple of catches, but not much. And again, I was kind of like, he's not involved in this offense. Why are we going gaga over this guy? Why is this even a discussion? And then every time I thought that, I would see a replay where Georgia is double teaming him deep to try and take him away. And I'm like, well, okay, if Georgia feels like their best bet defensively is to double team this guy, that kind of speaks to his ability as well, right? Like that matters. And so the last game that I put on was actually, I think, the first game of the season, which was against North Carolina in the Duke's Mayo Classic, in case you were wondering, and I'm sure no one was. And he actually looked really good in that game. I was like, this is what I'm looking for. Targets, catches, that sort of stuff. So he's very interesting. He is somebody that is going to be a topic of discussion for a good reason. And it's because he's a little older and he had a late breakout. He's kind of this 1 year wonder type of guy, but that 1 year was really, really good. Like, in a lot of ways, it's sort of the opposite of Lad McConkey, where like Lad McConkey was just sort of a part of Georgia's offense, was pretty good, had his best season in 2022, didn't really do much in 2023. Like, production is not there with Lad McConkey, but he's experienced and comes from a very successful team. And when you put on the tape, you're like, oh, this is a good player, and he's, a regular age. We feel pretty good about this. Xavier Legette is somebody who's a little bit older and only has 1 year to go off of, and it's tricky. It's tricky to really feel confident in 1 year guys. And there's suggestions, historically speaking, about guys that are 1 year wonders, who have their breakout later in terms of age. That being said, this is somebody probably worth taking a chance on, right? Like, this is somebody who's, first of all, just built super, super well. And not only that, I understand we had our whole discussion about 40-yard dash and how it's a little bit antiquated. regardless of that,
Mm-hmm.
Xavier Mitchell ran a ridiculous 40-yard dash given his size. I want to make sure I get the exact. First of all, there's also like 3 or 4 people in this draft at wide receiver that have the first name Xavier. It's very confusing and a little tricky to search for in terms of this. This man is 6'1". He's 221 pounds. He ran a 4.39 official 40-yard dash. That is crazy athleticism, and he's built well. He had a 10'6" broad jump. He had a 40-inch vert. These are like really good athletic testing measures, but he's a work in progress. He's a project. He's not somebody that I feel like is going to be a consistent contributor in year one. And if that's the case, is that somebody that you want on this team, specifically the Bills? Because again, like we're talking about, we're not talking about things in a vacuum necessarily. We're talking about guys that are going to contribute to this team in year one, year two, at the latest year two, right? The Bills need to make pushes now and get guys that are going to contribute now. There's a way, a path for Xavier Legette to have good contributions in year one, but he's still a project and he's going to take time. And I think he'll take more time than somebody like a Javon Baker, if we're being perfectly honest with ourselves. But the potential for Xavier Legette to be like the heir apparent wide receiver one for this team is probably higher than Javon Baker's is. You have to balance that as part of this as well.
Yeah, I see the one thing that I keep reading whenever I search Xavier Legette's name, from in every single scouting report, I see the same line over and over and over again. It's talented contested ball. Like at the point of attack, he'll go get the football. I would love that for the Bills. The reason I say that is Josh Allen's never going to get out of this kind of gunslinger mentality where he's just going to throw it and hope that somebody makes a play on the ball. If you have a dude that literally is a talented player at the contested catch, like that's his main selling point. Yeah, with a quarterback like Josh Allen, that seems to be a perfect fit. And to your point, like he probably has the higher ceiling than Javon Baker, but the lower floor. I'll bet on the higher ceiling. Like that's what I said before. I want to bet on the higher ceiling right now. And a player like him, yeah, go for it in a day as a day 2 pick.
Yeah, he's very interesting. He's somebody where, again, if they don't get one of the guys in the first round and they end up getting him in the second round, I'd feel good. I would be a little trepidatious just because of all the stuff we just talked about. Kind of. I don't know if I necessarily agree with this take from Charles. He says Legette is more scheme dependent versus other guys who are more plug and play. I don't know if that's necessarily it. I think that a scheme that will get him open will certainly help him more because it will require him to kind of think less and adjust less in the same sort of way that Puka went to an offense that allowed him to kind of just learn and grow. And as he learned more, he was able to contribute more and be more complete. But I think that Xavier Legette is not necessarily, it's not about scheme necessarily in my mind in terms of him as a player. It's more about how much can he contribute in year one. I think that's probably more scheme dependent. That would generally be my thought on that. DW, is this DW from the show Arthur? Is she a Bills fan? I didn't know that.
It wouldn't be her and Peppa Pig.
DW says, let's take 4 wide receivers and hope to hit on 2 of them. Man, so stuff like that like always makes me think of this friend I had in high school, still one of my best friends. He's a Browns fan, and this our senior year was 2014. If you want to age me, that's a good way to do that. And that was the year that Johnny Manziel and Teddy Bridgewater and that group came out. He was like, why doesn't a team that needs a quarterback like the Browns just take a quarterback in every round?
Take
one of them's got to hit, right? Just one of them has to hit. Just based on numbers alone, one of them has to hit. I was like, maybe you probably have a greater chance, but also that's really dumb.
Yeah.
All right, moving on. Because we're kind of running low on time, let's move to let's lump the two Texas wide receivers together.
Yeah.
Because I watched both of them last night. So I'm going to say this. I like Xavier Worthy more than Adonai Mitchell. Xavier, and I would even say that before he ran a record-breaking 4.21 in the 40-yard dash. Xavier Worthy is a clearly explosive player who I feel like has a little bit more ability in terms of route running right now that I think people would probably give him credit for. He's got great start-stop ability, great acceleration, great long speed, just has all this great stuff that you would expect for somebody that ran as fast as he did. He's another guy that you just sort of need to take your time with and bring along more with manufactured touches. But in some ways, he's not built as well as Percy Harvin is. But I think he reminds me of somebody that like you use like a Percy Harvin, right? Where you just find ways to get this guy the ball, whether it's taking shots deep, whether it's on a screen or a bubble, or putting him in the backfield and like tossing him the ball or something. Like you got to find a way to get this guy the ball. He is too explosive to not do that. Adonai Mitchell, on the other hand, I'm not really sure what people see in this guy. He had a very odd answer. I'm pretty sure it was Adonai Mitchell. I don't think it was Xavier Worthy who had this answer about route pacing and how Adonai Mitchell basically said that like he's never really run a route full speed because of how he paces routes. And I think that that's such a bullshit answer. Honestly, I think that's I've been watching a lot of Top Chef recently again, and there's just times where some of these guys get in front of the judges' table and they just sort of say things and they kind of look at each other and they just sort of all have the same thought, which is that that's a lie. Don't like. You messed up the scallops. You don't need to lie about it. You don't need to say this. It's like just admit where you went wrong so that we have a clear picture of what to do with you. Same thing with Adonai Mitchell. Admit where you're wrong so that we know what to do with you. Because based on what I saw, and admittedly, only a couple of games that I watched, one of them, side note, Quinn Ewers for Texas. Not a great quarterback. Whoever that backup is at Texas, I watched a game where he was the one throwing the ball. I was begging for Quinn Ewers about halfway through that game. I was losing my mind watching this dude play. Could not. That was rough. But with regards to Adonai Mitchell, like you need to be able to do different things and really just do something consistently. I don't really know what he does consistently. He's fast. Xavier Worthy is also fast. He's not as fast as Xavier Worthy, but Adonai Mitchell is a fast and talented guy, but like to what end? Like at this point, I really do feel more confident in Xavier Worthy being a good NFL player than I do Adonai Mitchell. And I don't think I would have said that coming into this particular weekend or even into this draft cycle, just based on how people were sort of talking about the two. I don't necessarily see it with Adonai Mitchell. And I don't think that the Bills are going to, much less should, take either of these two players. I think both of these guys are kind of avoid guys for me, but I'm much more interested in Xavier Worthy if it comes to that than I am Adonai Mitchell.
Yeah, I would agree with that for a couple points. So when it comes to Adonai Mitchell, so I don't know the credentials of this person. I don't know how well versed they are in Texas football, but there was a tweet from at Jetpack Galileo who tweeted, The in-game laziness of Adonai Mitchell is so funny because it comes from having a good understanding of the game. He'll recognize a coverage a couple steps into the route and decide to chill because he knows QB won't be looking his way. I hate that. If that's true, if that's literally what's happened, that's awful. Like, if you're just like, oh, I'm not going to get the ball, stop running my route or slow down on my route, that's just screams lack of process. Doesn't seem like a fit here in Buffalo. I don't know if that's true. I don't know if that's based in any fact or any true information that person has. But if that's the case, I shy away from that. As for Xavier Worthy, the speed is incredible. Like, as much as I, poo-pooed on that 40-yard dash, running a 4.21 is crazy. Like, that's wild to me.
Yeah, we could talk about how antiquated the 40-yard dash is. 4.21 is ridiculously fast, and it shows up
insane
on tape. Like, like he is just a fast person.
Yeah, there's the highlight of him catching the ball like on the right sideline and just turning on the jets and going right back past a bunch of people. Where the red flags come in for me is he weighs 165 pounds. That is so small, which is kind of wild because Devonta Smith weighed 165 pounds and is like 2 inches taller than him, which is that's even crazier to me. But on top of that, I've heard a lot people say you got to get this guy the ball, and they say that not just about Xavier Worthy, but a lot of players like him. And it reminds me of Tavon Austin. Like, that's the name like that comes into my head whenever I hear that style of play. Like, oh, the speed, their open field ability, like it's really good. And you brought up Percy Harvin, who, if it wasn't for his migraines, might have been one of the most freakish players to ever watch. But I get so scared off by that because I'm like, is that all this guy's going to be like, or is he going to have a different gear like a Tyreek Hill where he can suddenly be the super dangerous wide receiver because of his speed? I don't know with Xavier Worthy. Like, I haven't watched nearly enough of him to really have a true comment on that. He might completely blow the top off of defenses like Hill, or he might just be a nothing player. I honestly don't know with him.
Yeah, somebody like Xavier Worthy kind of just makes me think of like a Tutu Atwell in a sense. They're just like super fast, not really well built. And Tutu Atwell is like short as well, which was also part of the problem with Tutu Atwell. Whereas as Xavier Worthy is taller and at least more capable of doing things. But I'm very cautious about both of these Texas receivers. Could they be successful? I think Xavier Worthy could certainly be successful. I think I just need to do more into Adonai Mitchell because I just don't see it right now. And maybe I'll have to I might have to expose my own old takes on here at some point later. But as of right now, I'm not buying it with Adonai Mitchell, and especially like you said, this whole idea of like. By the way, the person that talked about the whole route pacing thing, was this person a fantasy football analyst, perchance?
It does say fantasy football film. Again, I don't know. I'm not saying that they're credentialed, but you brought up the weird, like his comments on. I don't run routes full speed. Like, it just, a lot of dots are connecting here. There seem to be a lot of excuses for laziness or something else going on. I don't know how true that is, but if he also is quoted as saying like, I don't run full speed. It's like, all right, dude, then we got issues here, man.
Like you've never run full speed. You've ever run a route full speed in your life. Come on, get out of here. You're not being real right now. Real quick, because we're running out of time here. Although I don't think the air raid hour is on this time. I think they already did their show yesterday. So, but regardless, the 2-hour show is a long time, so I don't want to push beyond that. Just quickly, I have not watched a lot of Roman Wilson. He's a speedier, a little on the slight build side of things. I've kind of seen him over the last couple of years, just being a Michigan State fan and seeing some Michigan games. Solid player. I don't know how well he'd necessarily fit in the Bills offense, but it's intriguing enough as an idea. Brendan Rice, not somebody that I got around to, somebody that I'll have to look more into. He is the son of Jerry Rice, in case that wasn't something that you weren't aware of. I don't know how much that actually matters, though. But some people really care about that sort of thing. One guy that I was able to look a little bit into that's actually kind of intriguing is Jamari Thrash from Louisville, or Louisville, wherever you're from. But he is a very loose, when you watch this guy play, he's got great start-stop ability, really good route running, solid hands, wins on the outside. My favorite thing watching him, though, was how he run blocks. Not because he's like some dominant run blocker. He's a slighter build. He's not like a big guy like a Gabe Davis is. Gabe Davis isn't dead. But what Jamari Thrash's goal seems to be as a run blocker is to just kind of like piss people off, where he just like stabs at them a little bit until they just like ignore their assignment and start going after him. And honestly, I kind of love that. That is just like, it almost feels like he's acknowledging who he is, and like that he's probably not going to just like physically dominate a guy as a run blocker, but if he could just sort of get in their heads, it'll pay off in the run game, and it'll probably pay off in the passing game as well.
I mean, I like a little annoying players. I brought up who did I bring up last week? The corner, Chauncey Gardner. Yeah. So if we get that a little bit of that on offense, I wouldn't hate it. The only other name that I'll throw out there that I have some interest in, but haven't done a lot of research. He has really good RAS score, and he had what probably was the catch of the year. Ricky Pearsall. Yeah. That one-handed catch over the middle was that's still burned into my memory how good that was. The idea of seeing something like that in Buffalo is very intriguing to me. But again, this 185 pounds or whatever he is at 6'1", that's pretty slight, and I wonder how that works if you get a really physical corner pushing on you.
I get that. I think he is probably more of a slot guy than some of the other guys, but he's also a really good player. I remember when he was at Arizona State back in 2019, I want to say, didn't get a ton of targets. That was when Jaden Daniels was also there, and Brandon Ayuk. Great team. Couldn't do anything because Herm Edwards is an idiot. But like he flashed enough where I was like, this is a potentially interesting guy. And so when he transferred to Florida, I was like, oh, look at that. He's doing something. He's going somewhere. And then obviously this year he was great. He was great at the Senior Bowl, was somebody that definitely stood out to people there. So I'm intrigued by Ricky Pearsall in general, like in a vacuum, but I don't know if this is somebody that I'd want to draft for the Bills right now. Any other final parting thoughts before we get out of here?
No, I just like, I think like on Twitter, for me at least, I think a lot of I might have pissed a lot of people off because I'm like, I need the Bills to draft a defensive lineman. Yeah, me. I need the Bills to draft a defensive lineman. But in saying that, like, I need them to draft a wide receiver. Like I said earlier, if they don't pick one in the first 2 days, not only will I be stunned, but I'll be pissed because they need to start not only building for the future, but if they can find an upgrade to Gabe Davis, which is not as easy as people think it is, if they can find an upgrade to Gabe Davis, then this offense, which is already elite, regardless of all the issues that it has, it's already elite and it can get even better. Now, if the defense has a bad game, you can just try to outscore the people, try to put up 50 points a game if you have to.
Yeah. All for that. Steve Mathis, thank you. Hans can never piss anyone off. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Very grateful to each and every one of you for coming out. If you have not already, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button down below. Go subscribe to this channel. Go subscribe to Cover One Fantasy. If there's one fantasy football analyst you should take seriously, it's Chris Chews, and all the work that he does is crazy. Go subscribe to him right now. Go subscribe to the Cover One college football channel, where the draft guys, John and Daniel, have their show. They're great. They're crushing it right now. I'm gonna see if we can even get them on at some point during our show. We'll see what happens.
Yeah.
But them, Marlon with his show about college football, it's great. Under review tomorrow night. Air Raid Hour put out a couple of videos already for this week. Flagship show, the Skies coverage. You've got the film room. You've got Buffalo Late Night with Tom Stalaus. We got you covered. If the Walls Could Talk is another great show, we got you covered here from top to bottom. This is the place you need to be for the rest of this offseason if you want to talk about the Bills. And if you want to go even further into the Bills, if you want even just further what you know about the game itself, go subscribe to One Pass like we talked about earlier. There is a whole giveaway. Thank you. Going on right now. It's $60 a year. You get decal, you get a t-shirt, you get a letter, you get entered into this giveaway, PS5, Josh Allen jersey, neon sign, all that good stuff. Uber, where can the people find you?
At UberHansen on Twitter. I'll be on there, not pissing people off.
You can find me at DFAUXY. I am pissing people off. And I will see you all later. Bye-bye.